Welcome to this edition of our Nights to Know series. This evening we'll be featuring educators who inspire. I'm Dr. Rick Snyder, current co-chair of the department, and it's my privilege to work alongside an outstanding team of education faculty. And we are keenly aware that we stand on the shoulders of educational faculty giants who have taught in the hallowed halls of Old Main for decades. Feel free throughout the course of the evening to submit any questions that you have using the Q&A button. And toward the end of the night's session, we'll get to as many of those questions as we possibly can. We're excited that you've joined us tonight. And without further ado, I will introduce the 18th president of Wartburg College, President Ertzman.
Thank you, Rick, and what a privilege to be introduced by you. It's interesting to think about the amazing educators in our education department and know what your leadership has done to continue to grow that department. So thank you for your commitment to Wartburg and for all your leadership, Ricks. Thank you all for being here tonight. It's a total privilege to welcome our current students, alumni, and friends of the college to Nights to Know, a series that explores the amazing work that Wartburg graduates are doing in the world. Tonight, we're joined by alumni who are doing just that. And I'm excited to introduce my student co-host, Eliana Trilling. Eliana, will you join us and share a little bit more about yourself, please?
Hi, thank you, President Becky. I'm so excited to be here. My name's Eliana Trilling. I am a third-year elementary education major with endorsement in middle school math and science, and then I also have a leadership minor. On campus, I am on the Wartburg women's soccer team. I work as the social media marketer for our NSTA chapter, a dance marathon morale captain, and I am a student worker for the Wartburg social media and marketing department. Today we have a great group of alumni joining us, and I'd like to introduce to you each of them, and they're going to tell you a little bit more about themselves and how they kind of got to where they are today and what their career path has looked like. So first I would like to introduce to you Dr. Josh Lyons.
Thanks, Eliana. I'm Josh Lyons. I'm the Associate Superintendent of Teaching and Learning with the Solon Community School District. My career started just after I graduated from Wartburg in 1999. Actually jumped in the field of education as a substitute to start with, which was great to get my feet wet. But then landed in Dunkerton for a couple of years as a coach and an elementary teacher. Then from there, I married my wife, Michelle Doom Lyons, who's a class of 2001. And we ended up down in Davis County for a year and then came back up closer to home, where we've resided in Solon now for about 24 years. But my career path took me then to West Branch as an elementary teacher and then an elementary principal in Independence, Iowa for a couple of years. And then in 2008, I spent about 4 years in Anamosa as an elementary principal. And then from there, my path is long. and then ended up at Grantwood AEA as a regional administrator, where I supported several different schools and worked in special education administration and school improvement. And then in 2019, I received my doctorate from Drake University in education, and have been in the Solon Community School District for about 8 years now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, one of our panelists, Dr. Lamont, is not able to be here right now. He's currently in Missouri, and they're having some weather technical difficulties and some power outage, but we're hoping that he can get on to join us. So we're going to skip his introduction for now, and we'll let him introduce himself when he can join, hopefully. So next we have Cynthia Phillips. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. And I don't want to forget this, so I want to say hello and give a shout out to all the awesome educators that are watching and Wartburg educators that are watching, and specifically my daughter, who's a junior in elementary education major at Wartburg. But I'm so excited to be here. So I taught for about 15 years. The majority of that was in Denison, Iowa, high school English teacher and athletic coach. I transitioned into administration, and my first job as 712 principal and athletic director was in Southwest Iowa in a little town, Avoca. That school district was made up of 5 communities, AHSTW. From there, I transitioned to the high school principalship at North Polk, which is north of the Des Moines area, north of Ankeny and Polk City. When I got my superintendent certification, then I transitioned into the superintendent level role and went to Cedar Rapids Community School District, where I was the executive director of high schools for Cedar Rapids. And the last 3 years, I've been here in Independence as the superintendent. Very excited to be here. Thank you.
Wow, what a pleasure to meet both of you and to have you here tonight with us. And Cynthia, excited to hear that your daughter's here too. That's exciting. So thank you for the shout out.
I got to call out Josh because his daughter's there too. They're in the
Yes,
Josh!
I didn't do a very good job of calling out my daughter Kerrigan. So yes, she's an elementary education major as well. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, hopefully they're both having a wonderful experience. And obviously the apples don't fall too far from the tree in these situations, right? So welcome tonight. These are conversations, and we're so excited for you to be here with us tonight. We know that people are on live. We know that people listen to the podcast and watch us on YouTube later. So this is for present and future audiences. A reminder to anybody who's watching tonight, there is the Q&A box. If you have any questions you want to ask, please don't hesitate to put them in the Q&A box. We'll keep an eye on it during the webinar. If there's something that makes sense to pop in while we're talking, we'll do that. And if not, we will wait until we're finished. So Josh, I'm going to start with you. What inspired you to pursue teaching as your life's work? And can you share a moment when you realized the true impact of your role as an educator?
Honestly, I think what inspired me to pursue teaching was spending time with my grandmother, who was a grade school teacher way back when I was young. She was a grade school teacher in Wisconsin, in Walworth, Wisconsin. And my grandfather, who passed away before I was born, was actually school board president of that same school district. And so education runs deep that way. My uncle was involved in education. That was kind of started everything for me. But I didn't really realize it until I got to college. And in college at Wartburg, I actually started off as a communication major. I spent 2 years trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And after a couple of years of kind of wandering around aimlessly, trying to really understand what my career goal or my goals were in life, I decided elementary education and started to go down that path. And from there, it just kind of spiraled. I really loved working with kids. That was kind of the enjoyment that I had in my life, and really they kind of inspired me to, I think, explore further what it was to keep furthering my education as a learner. So when I think about the moment, I don't think there's one moment that really has made me realize the true impact of me as an educator. I think it's a series of moments over time where the interactions, the engagements that I've had, my opportunities to engage in leadership, to be able to support kids, have build relationships with families, and really, I think I really think to understand what it means to be a true leader. So yeah.
Yeah, I can appreciate the idea of not quite knowing what I wanted to do when I came to Wartburg. In my core, I knew I wanted to do something that was going to impact people's lives positively, and maybe something around helping people. I didn't know. I took some social work classes, took some foundation of education classes my freshman year, and so on. What I did know is that I had really great teachers and coaches that had made a difference in my life. And I think there was something, well, I couldn't have named it at that point, but I think that was what made me realize, oh, I want to do that for others. And then it just was kind of this smoldering that was there for a while. And then once I got into teaching, I didn't truly understand the impact in my first several years of teaching. And like, I should apologize to all the students I had then because I wasn't my best that I, know I could be and could have been now. However, the moment that I understood the impact or power that educators had was a moment. There was a year where a student was not passing his classes, and there were other teachers and colleagues that just said, "Yep, you didn't do this. You don't get the grade. Nothing we can do about it." And he dropped out. And I thought, oh, there's got to be a different way that we can do this work. And like we are the system, so we get to change the system if there's something that's not working, and these are human beings' lives. And so that was the spark that changed everything for me and changed my trajectory, both as an educator in the classroom and my passion for what we created for kids. And then when I did transition to administration, which took a lot of pushing because I did not want to leave the classroom, it was because a mentor said, yeah, but look how many more lives you can impact in that role than, with the 200 kids you see every day. But now in a building, you could see 1,500, or you could have impact on 1,500, and that's been my motivation ever since. And so it is an awesome responsibility, and it is a heavy responsibility. And I'm so thankful that, I've been able to do it, but I could not have said that when I was at Wartburg, or even, several years out of it. But I'm so glad for that realization.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you. I mean, I had no idea like really what it meant to impact kids' lives. I also believe like the work that I've done, especially in the area of special education, because when I grew up, I had an IEP. I had a mom who had to advocate for me constantly. And so I think that's probably another part of my, what's inspired me to be an educator, is to be able to support and help other kids, and especially families and parents navigate such a system that can be so confusing with the language and all the different people around the table saying you should do this or you can't do that. And I think for me, it's also how can I advocate for our families and ultimately advocate for our kids to ensure that they get what they need. So it's an amazing opportunity to be in education right now, even though it is also very difficult too.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things that you've said that I feel very connected to. So Josh, my parents were both teachers. And so when I went from being an OT to a faculty member, I thought this feels right? I watched my mom and dad do this my whole life, but also to the point of helping the students who need us the most. It's really interesting to watch those students cross the stage at graduation, to know that their life will be changed because of the education that we've been a part of. I think those are the success stories, and those are the victories that you feel like really that we believe in those students who sometimes don't believe in themselves or need that extra help from us. And I just think that's such a privilege of being a teacher, right? Of really helping students find their voice or the things that maybe they don't see in themselves. And so that's just such a beautiful part of being able to teach. And Cynthia, gosh, to go from being a faculty member to administrator, I was like, no, I love being in the classroom. I love being engaged with the students. And so it's challenging, but you do get to reach a little bit farther when you're in the administrative seat. I just find like I was just coming from Adventurous East, as these guys know, with all of our students, and I love being around them. It's just wonderful to be in the presence of our students because they're the joy of the work, right? They're the reason that we do this thing. And so, yeah, what great answers. Eliana, I'm going to pass it to you.
Thank you. Yeah, you guys, honestly, hearing you say that was just so special as someone who has recently entered into college and obviously also didn't know like what I wanted to do. And I think there's such a common thing behind people our age who are entering in and not quite sure what they want to do and not quite sure what their interests are or their thing is. And I think it's so cool to hear you guys share your journey and just everything that you went through to come where you are and be where you are right now. And so now kind of both of you guys, I want to ask, how do you measure success beyond just grades and test scores? How do you feel that you can best measure success? And both you guys can feel free to pop in and answer, please.
I think there are probably the most important things that we teach and hope to see grow in our students that go far beyond the grades and test scores. So I think of things like, how they can work with others, how they can ask questions and listen, and truly listen to learn and understand, and how they can be innovative in solving problems. I think about building their emotional intelligence, that EQ. Those are the things that I think when we look for those things, that's what will help them be successful in whatever path they decide to do. And those, and they reach far beyond a standardized test, score. So
Yeah, and I just kind of bouncing off of that too, like really thinking about what are the passions that kids bring to their education. Seeing kids, especially at our well across the system, you know, tests and grades are not the only thing. It's how are they engaging in the experience that they have in school right now, especially at the high school level. There's so many different opportunities for them to really engage and build relationships. That's a really important piece too. But I go back to even more so, like what is the passion that they have beyond school? Where do they want to end up? And so right now, I think in high schools, they're starting to turn into more, incubators for what do you want to be when you grow up? What does success look like for you beyond high school? And it's not about, did you get 99th percentile on the current Iowa assessment? We're trying to prepare kids to be successful, whether that's in college, whether they go right into a career, or maybe they enlist in the military. But trying to identify we're trying to identify kids' identity sooner than later, so that they feel confident and competent when they leave for the world. So that's what I see as more important than tests and grades.
I mean, generally are they showing up and thriving and happy?
Mhm,
Do they
right.
have joy?
Yeah.
Are they enjoying whatever the task is that they get to do? I mean, that's how we hope to see people show up,
Mhm,
whether it's at school, whether it's at the job, but that, they have the agency to
mhm.
figure it out and do what they need to do. And that's really hard to measure in a grade or a test score. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you both. We'll move on to our next question. And Cynthia, we've got your name to get us started on this one. And this is something I think about all the time at Wartburg. And it's interesting to have both of you as grads coming up on anniversaries here, probably for both of you.
Mhm.
This idea of students are changing, right? Generations change. And so when you think about what Wartburg was when you were here and how it's different now and how it will be different 20 years from now, think a lot about these generational shifts. So what students need in the classrooms. I think what tools they have at home. I think a lot about AI. I think about cell phones. I think about what they're engaged with at home that's different now than it was when we were children. How have you adapted, or how do you adapt, or even how do you teach your students to adapt to generational shifts in student expectations and learning styles?
yeah, this was a really interesting concept to think about around generational shifts with student expectations. Um, I'm going to start with good teaching and learning is good teaching and learning, no matter if the tools or trends change. And I'm also going to go to the student experience side of it and say, we all want to be noticed and cared for and have connection. And so when I think about generational, I see that as the thread that binds us all together, even as we go through the invention of the World Wide Web or cell phones and social media and now artificial intelligence. So yeah, we've been doing this long enough that we've seen some pretty significant changes and impacts around tools that we have, to use and or ways that we get to engage students in the learning process. One of the things I love about education, and that I would say to up and coming educators, is you have to love learning and continuing to learn your whole life, because it will be a job that you'll never be bored in, because there's always something new coming out or happening, or shifts and trends or whatever that may be. I have loved that over my almost 30 years of being in education. I love the challenge of it. I love trying to figure out how to use the tools and do better, and how can this impact academic achievement? How can this impact student engagement? But I can also see that as frustration, and overwhelming, right? When we are ourselves learning about it while we're using it and teaching it to others, and also having to assess it all at the same time. Like, that's a really complex thing to do, which is why I think, to become an educator, like, there's a level of brilliance and that you've got to have in you, because you're doing that. And so, yeah, it was just fascinating to think about. And I guess I would just say, even as we see on the surface things change or become available or be taken away or whatever, that thread, the underlying strand that's there of just general, here's how we want to be human beings together, and here's how we want to continue to learn and improve together, remains the constant. And so then we can be grounded in that.
Yeah, and I think it goes along those lines of too, Cindy or Cynthia, regarding like interests, like what are student interests? Again, I go back to that idea, what are they passionate about? What is the direction they're heading down? As high schools change and priorities change, not all kids are going to college, they're going into the career. So what are we doing to provide those opportunities in high school to give them those experiences so that they feel like they're prepared to be successful beyond high school? And I'm going to probably say that multiple times here tonight. So.
Well, and I would add, Cynthia, to what you said too. I think to be an excellent teacher means to be a lifelong learner. And I love the word curious, because I think the hardest part about being a teacher is that idea that you're supposed to be the expert in everything, and demonstrating curiosity to our students. I think when we're still learning, I think it speaks volumes to them. I think it creates vulnerability, but I also think it also maybe helps them to feel like they can be themselves and be curious in the learning space as well. Because the straight A student, and I think that, the previous question got to that, it's really not getting straight A's isn't what's important. It's the willingness to learn and make mistakes and learn from your mistakes that, I think is what we should hopefully demonstrate as the teachers too.
Yeah, that was, I would say, a noticeable shift for me when I figured out as a teacher, I didn't have to know everything. That actually this is an occupation where I can learn alongside of those that I'm also facilitating, teaching with. And the job became so much more enjoyable, and fun, and just the things that, I could learn from students and they could learn from me. And I was so glad to have that shift, especially with, the advent of Google and all that, because it used to be the teacher would have been the owner of all the information. And so if we think generationally, that shift, that was very hard for some to overcome when that was the thing that you were really good at. So I agree, some of those mindset shifts and just being able to appreciate, not having to know everything and being able to be curious and ask questions, and modeling that then for your learners, because that's what we want them to do for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Eliana, it's all yours.
Awesome. Yeah, that's honestly such good advice. I think something that a very wise man, my dad, who was a professor at a college, used to always say to me, I'd come home with my grade and be like, look, like I got an A. Like he was like, hey, great, but did you learn? And I think it's just so important to remember that as future teachers, but also as students. Like you said, like we're always learning. And so that's just so important. So thank you guys for your wise words of wisdom. Josh, this one's for you. Next question is, how do you see education shaping communities beyond the classroom? And where do you feel that education has an impact in communities? And what kind of impact have you seen in your own life and experiences?
I think with high schools really shifting towards an emphasis on career and technical education courses, where kids are engaging in more business classes or FCS classes, exploring their careers in high school, as well as the work-based learning connection options that we're providing them through internships, apprenticeships, pre-apprenticeships. We're actually building courses to be able to support that, engaging in, and actually we're looking at adding some education pathways for our kids to start exploring further that possibility of careers. But I think the emphasis is really, again, considering what is it that kids are passionate about, what are their interests, and getting them prepared through exploring career and their academic plan. Really thinking about how to prepare them with the skills that they need to be successful, and not just this emphasis on going to college, but they could go right into a career right outside of high school. They can go to a trade school. Some are going right into apprenticeships and taking that opportunity right within their communities and experiencing those right within their communities, which then could lead to other opportunities for jobs, impacting the economics within their community, impacting their families, and honestly staying put right with where they are and not having to move away. And so I think that ability for schools to prepare kids in that way can really support those communities in regards to keeping the kids right where we need them to be able to support the goals and priorities of those communities.
I am a recovering ELA teacher. And so I think there's a quote from Mark Twain that says something about out of public education grows the greatness of a nation, or the greatness of a nation is, grows out of public education, or something to that idea. And that's what I think about when I think about this, is the importance of an education in a democracy. And, these are the formative years where we get to help facilitate not only learning for students, but helping students think and critically think. And that is so important foundationally for our society. And then we drill down to our communities, right? And then the groups that we're in our communities and so on. And so again, when I think about the responsibility because of the impact of that, it's huge, but yet a calling that I do feel like educators get to answer. And so we have such an influence on how we are going to help one another engage in whatever the topic is, or, wherever you're living, or, when we go to vote, or, things like that. And we need an educated, informed, critical thinking community and society to ensure that we continue to improve, and move forward and make progress.
Perfect segue. Our next question is really about kind of democracy. Like, what is the responsibility of educators in preparing our students for an uncertain future? I would also say right now, an uncertain present. And what are the ways that educators in classrooms are engaging students in being prepared? And I think, Cynthia, to your point, part of that is democratizing the classroom, right? Like having critical conversations, teaching civil discourse, all those pieces. But how are you both feeling about that at present? And either of you can start this, whoever feels most curious or interested.
Yeah, I can start. I think since the pandemic, the end of the pandemic, I think in public schools we get tired of talking about that a little bit. I mean, we're well past that now, but especially in terms of students' mental health and wellness and the needs that they present, because life is really hard right now. Society is changing. Yes, there is a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of anxiety. And so really trying to think about what are the skills of success, or skills for success, for students. And so, we have schools right now, there's kind of a trend of creating portrait of a graduate. And we look at it from a standpoint of life skills for success. And I think Cynthia actually said a few of these things earlier. How are we preparing kids to persevere through difficult situations? How do we present or model those opportunities within the classroom setting, to work through hard things? How do we teach them to collaborate? We have to be able to get along and collaborate. And what does that look like? What are the skills that it takes to collaborate with one another in an effective way, in a positive way, with compassion? I think that's another thing, is how do we help kids learn that skill of being compassionate towards one another? Another one that I think actually Cynthia said earlier too was critical thinking, problem solving skills. Having that is so critical. I was actually having a conversation with a colleague earlier this week about, we don't have people don't have something to grasp onto in terms of a problem solving process. Like, what does that mean to problem solve, and how do we support kids in working through that? Because not only in a job they need to have those problem solving skills, but they also need to have that in life, when they're dealing with those difficult situations that come up. And another one that we are really focused on too is creating a balanced lifestyle. With especially in the digital age of device addiction and AI and social media and all those things, uh, we need to help kids unplug and connect better, so that they can feel confident in their lives, which I think takes away some of those anxieties, especially if they can connect with others through a balanced lifestyle. So.
Yeah, I agree with, many of the skills that Josh had mentioned. I mean, if we go back to that generational shift question, we've known for generations that we've been teaching and training students for jobs that we didn't even know what were going to exist. So it's certainly been expedited with the advent of technology and, now artificial intelligence and so on. But so going back to, is our education teaching students how to learn? Is that the thing that they're leaving with? Yes, all the soft skills around collaboration and, creativity and all of that, but have we taught them how to learn? And, there's brain research on, specific things that if you're going to learn a new skill or try something different, like here are some things that if you do this, it'll come easier, it'll go faster, it'll stick longer. And so I hope that that's what we've layered in as they go through the content pieces of it, that they're really figuring out and understanding, oh, here's who I am as a learner, and here's how I can adapt to new things and understand new things, and then take my new learning and apply it to this. And so if we can do that really well, then we've achieved the goal, which is they are prepared for anything that's going to come, which a lot of that we don't even know yet. And we know this, going through our careers too. It's just so rare to stay in a career doing the same thing the entire career. And so even in our experiences, the different jobs that we've moved into, required us to keep learning and understand how to adapt and things like that. And so I think that is a foundational element that students need to leave their K-12 graduation, education with, but that is the thing that they got to hang on to like forever, no matter, what they end up doing throughout their life, career experiences, all of that. So it's that idea of do we understand how to learn, and then those other skills that in a new environment, what does this look like?
That kind of reminds me, Cynthia, that, you know, as we've gone through school and, there are mission statements out there that say we want to create lifelong learners. I think at times that has become somewhat of a cliche. Yes, we want to be lifelong. Well, what does it mean to learn? Like to your point, because, and kind of back to that whole conversation about grades and test scores. Like if we emphasize product over process, wow, I think we've lost the battle because we're looking for an end result. And right now in education, it's all about these results. What results are you getting? How are you monitoring your data to ensure the results are there? Because those results tell us whether we're successful or not. I don't agree with that. I think it's process over product, the learning process and how we engage kids and how to learn. Because otherwise they will become stagnant. They will just settle for, I'm good enough. But in order to truly prepare kids, we need to teach them that process, what it means to be a learner. Yeah.
And to tie a couple of those pieces together, Josh, you were talking about mental health, and Cynthia, earlier, you were talking about emotional intelligence. And I think a lot about emotional regulation, to show up in spaces when we're feeling unstable, uncertain, concerned, all those things, to be good learners and engage in those spaces is challenging. So to teach our young people how to emotionally regulate, how to manage the ways they're feeling and show up in curious and positive and productive ways. And to your point, not about grades, but actually about making a difference and learning and all those things together. I think that's the biggest challenge, especially in a world now that our students are exposed, I believe, to so much more than our earlier generations were. I feel like we were more protected because we didn't have these devices in our hands where we could see the concerns of the world at our fingertips 24/7. And yeah, but putting all those pieces together is the question for the future, right? Of how do we do this and continue to do it well for our students and our future students?
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. And I think that's what's frustrating in education is that's not what's measured on our quote unquote school report card. And that is just really difficult to reconcile because it's like we know though this is the important thing if we're talking, contributions to society in the future and so on. And yet though all of those things that you just mentioned there aren't on a data sheet on a report card, and so that's hard, but
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just a follow-up question. As a lot of people on here are possibly or probably future educators. You talked a lot about creating an environment that teaches students and young kids how to learn. And what do you think would be that ideal environment? Or how do you think as future educators, we can prepare to create that environment for our students and be that kind of example for them? Both of you, if you have any insight on that.
no, I love this. This is what I am super passionate about and why I didn't really leave the classroom because I love this brain research around like how people learn. And there's like some simple elements I can give examples. For instance, you have to activate prior background knowledge. So something that you already know has to be pulled up and activated for something new that you're learning to attach to it for you to hang on to that. Like that's one example of our students should know that very basic idea because then they can be in charge of their own metacognition of like, oh, this is new. Oh, do I know anything that is like this, that is familiar that I could, and obviously not pull up in my brain that I can connect this to, right? But so they might not use those words, but they understand the process and then they can start doing that. Another one is purpose setting. Like when we go into something, if we don't know what our purpose is in that, we will not be able to engage or learn or take away what we need to in it. And so again, a really simple thing that if a learner understands that and nobody sets a purpose, they can either pause and say, hey, what am I supposed to be doing here? What am I, and do it themselves, or they can look for that purpose. And so there's a whole like training around all this, but this is where I'm like, these are the things foundationally as a K-12 system and that we need to do more explicitly. So all of the research-based programs, the science of reading, things like that we're doing, if you know the research behind the learning in the brain, you can see how that's embedded in all of these curriculums. But if we don't know that, then we're just teaching a curriculum and we're not able to call it out to the learner. And so if we have educators that understand, here's how kids learn, or we all learn, then when we're going through some type of coursework or whatever, we can help call out to them, here's why this is sticking to you, or here's why it isn't. Let's try this strategy. And so that's what I loved about being a teacher, was facilitating all of that. And then watching students realize, oh, I can do this and I can engage in this way. And so I think that's just part of the joy of being a teacher, but then we can't miss passing that along and making sure we're really explicit for our students so that they can then go do that on their own.
Eliana, you mentioned ideal, right? And I want to build off of Cynthia's ideas in regards to when we think about the brain research, and we think about curriculum, and curriculum is there to be able to guide us in teaching and learning. I even think about this idea of how do we create environments where there's personalized learning, where there's voice and choice, agency and ownership for students, where they can follow a path or a passion within a content area, where it's not just about the curriculum, it's not just about meeting a standard or getting a test, or getting an A on a test. It's really about being creative. That curiosity that Cynthia, you mentioned earlier, is in an ideal world, that's what every classroom should look like, because I think that's where we can push kids beyond just this one expectation and take them further so they can actually grow. And that is part of that learning process. So if we can create those types of learning environments for kids where they have voice and choice, and follow a passion or an interest, that would take us way further.
So I know we've got a new educator right here, and I think we've probably got some new educators that both of you know on the call tonight or are going to listen. Talk a little bit about the advice you'd give to new educators entering the profession today. And I'm going to add in a question from our audience. So thank you, audience, for the questions so far. For those new educators, talk a little bit about finding a mentor or the importance of mentoring relationships. And I think the word mentor can feel big and heavy. So even support systems, colleagues, how did that work for both of you? And what recommendations would you make for new educators and people who might support and guide them along the way?
Well, I would say when I first started, I didn't have that. Didn't get that. It was, here's your classroom, here's the stuff, now go teach. And not really having a great idea in terms of the direction I was going. So mentoring is super important, because when you think about building someone's self-efficacy, one of the most important components of building self-efficacy is having someone that you can bounce ideas off of, having someone you can go to talk about your struggles, get advice on ideas, even sometimes be able to mediate on a challenge or help you think through those problems. Mentoring is really critical, and again, it goes back to relationships. What are the relationships that you can build as a new teacher? Because I think when we have new teachers, young teachers coming into the field, and they don't feel connected to their workplace, they don't feel connected to their colleagues. I think they feel left out, and I think they're left to struggle on their own. But they need to take advantage of those opportunities now with school districts. There's requirements that we have a mentoring induction program, but I've also seen where new teachers don't take advantage of that, and they try to minimize that because they don't want to be seen as incompetent. It's not about being incompetent. It's about building your confidence and competence. And it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to have someone there. I wish I would have.
Yeah, I agree. What I would say is understand your core values and how you want to show up into this space. It is difficult to be your best in the chaos of education and of the daily classroom if you aren't grounded in why you want to do what you want to do. And so spending some time really thinking about, like, ultimately, what does he want to do? Well, I want to love on kids and I want to help people. I want to lift people's burdens and I want to help them be great. Okay. And so you've got to know that, because that will determine who you hang out with in your job, where you work. There are going to be options of groups that you can connect with in a school system. And some are going to be more positive than others. And you've got to know enough about yourself and the person that you want to be and show up as every day to also make a decision and an effort to then put yourself around people who are showing up with the same energy and passion and love that you have. So more than anything, because otherwise you will get drugged down into the weeds too quickly with just all of the things that go into working in a school every day. I would say you definitely need to be someone that likes not knowing what you're going to experience each day you show up to work. Like, you've got an idea and you've got a schedule, and like, here's the, you know, periods or the courses or whatever it might be that you're going, but you're in a profession where you're raising human beings, and sometimes hundreds or thousands of them all together under the same roof. And so it's going to be messy. And if that's going to drive you crazy, then probably being a teacher is not the right, you know, necessarily space. There's other spaces in education that could still work, but not the daily classroom teacher for it. So, you know, some of those things to think about and consider. You will be surrounded by some veteran, amazing educators, and watch them. Ask them questions, you know, ask to go in and observe their classroom, ask them to come into your classroom, sit with them during the lunch, you know, your lunch time, and, you know, run ideas by. I will say almost 30 years in this, and there is something every year that happens that is a first for me. There's some, you know, sometimes weekly, that's like, oh, didn't know that. And so I love that. Like, I enjoy that about the work, but also that's what's really hard about it too, because we're always trying to figure things out that we hadn't experienced before or, you know, gone through. And so even your veteran teachers who will become some of your best mentors will also have days where they're like, what in the world? And what do we do now? And so, I guess just one, being aware of that as you go into this profession, being able to be okay with it. And, you know, that's the other great thing too. It's messy. And so, you know, that's just fine with it. Just understanding enough to know that if you don't get the content covered that day, but you made a child or another human being feel good, sometimes that's the victory, right, in it. So
Cynthia, if I were to build on that, I would say you're going to screw it up. There's going to be a day that you go home and you're like, wow, I was a really bad teacher today. Like, that did not go well. But the other thing that I did not think when I became a faculty member was, for one group of students, I could do something that went perfectly. And then I'm like, oh, I've got this figured out. I know exactly what I want to do. And then the next year or the next semester, I have a different group of students and it totally failed. And I was like, but it was the same activity. And so that's also that there's a dependency on the people in your classroom of whether what you want to do will work. And so you're not going to always be the magical part of that. Like, sometimes it does depend on who's sitting in front of you and the day you're all having. And sometimes things just don't work. And sometimes you have to pivot and you have to have things in your back pocket to think, this is not working, I'm going to try something else. And that's okay. And at the end of it, for me, always was just being gentle with yourself. Like, if you didn't have the perfect teacher day, to say, the good news is there's another day tomorrow. And the most amazing part about being a faculty member is you get to start again every year. And that's the real love in my life of teaching was I got to try it all over again. And I think a lot of people are not in jobs where they have that privilege.
I love that. I actually had a plaque in my office that says 365 new days, 365 new chances, new opportunities. And so, yeah, I would say not even each year, but I would say that is the beauty of what we get to create as the educator is we have the ability to show up and tell our class, hey, things didn't go well yesterday. We're starting over new today. And I love that idea of, I don't think we're ever bad teachers for an entire day. I think there's a moment that went bad, but we let that ruin the entire day or week or, whatever that is. And so that's where, when you talk about being kind to yourself, gentle with yourself, because you're a human trying to figure this out too, as you're managing, all these other humans in the space and, verbalizing that, talking out loud to the kids, we're modeling to them, like, here's how we recover from mistakes. Here's how we, can reconcile things. Here's how we can do it. And so, yeah, I appreciate all of that.
Yeah, that was so awesome. To kind of just add on to that and bounce off that question, what do you guys, what innovations, like what new things excite you both, more about the future of teaching and learning? Any like new things, and we talked about the generational questions, but what are the new things that you're just excited to see and watch flourish as you guys continue doing amazing things?
I think I think just the push for those work-based learning options that we're providing kids and seeing where that goes, the opportunities within the school to explore pathways of what direction do I want to head, to be able to support those interests of kids. We're really at the beginning stages of this, and it's really going to start to take off. That traditional high school, I think, is starting to go to the wayside a little bit because there's such a focus on students being prepared beyond high school. So I'm really excited to see where that heads. I think the other piece is I'm really curious where this AI stuff is going to take education. I think there's a lot of opportunities, but I think there's a lot of question marks I have in terms of the impact that can have on learning.
Yeah, I like the idea of thinking about the shifts in traditional education model. For me, this is the blessing of technology because there's can be several curses from the development of technology and some of the access points. But I think one of the positive things of it is the ability to create open walled classrooms, that there's so much access to information and knowledge, and we get to figure out ways to bring that together and use it for good. And so the ability then to really start to poke holes in a traditional model that does not work for everyone, and to give that access and opportunity to students to engage in their learning. To me, that is the innovation that our system still has not allowed us to, build on yet. There are places that are doing it better than others, but if we could figure out how to be more flexible in the ways we allow students to show their intelligence, to show their genius, and that to learn and gather and information and things like that. Artificial intelligence, as Josh mentioned, is, interesting to think about currently how we're using it, which is, I'm sure, more of just the substitute model for Google at this point, but there's going to be a time that education is going to have to evolve, and AI will be the tool that probably helps us to, recreate things and or create new things from that. I don't know that we're seeing that yet.
Yeah.
But those are the things that are exciting to think about when we talk about innovation. Education, the model of education does not innovate very easily and very fast. And that can be frustrating. I mean, that has been a frustration of mine because, again, I go back to, we could be doing this so differently and so better, but there's a lot of just structure things there that are very hard to change. So I do look forward to hopefully seeing some of that evolve.
Yeah, and what you said, Cynthia, it's interesting. I think, AI, it's so easy to reject out of hand, and yet we know it's out there. So how could we actually harness its information and help our students to learn how to use it? Um, so we have an attendee tonight, Dawn Yeager, who's from Grinnell, lives in Grinnell. She's a Wartburg grad. She's on the President's Advisory Council. So Dawn, thank you for being here and thank you for your question. Dawn's question is about the people that surround you as an educator. She's talking about OTs. Thank you, Dawn. I'm an OT, so I love that part of the question. PTs, social workers, school psychologists, counselors, nurses. When you think about collaboration, and I think, Josh, certainly in your area in special education, probably a lot of this comes into play. What kinds of skills would you say that our students as future educators are going to need to develop to work alongside these other professionals?
That's actually an excellent question because during my time at Grant Wood AEA, that was a lot of our conversation is how do we come alongside those educators that are in those buildings working daily with kids. It really comes down to, I believe, a service mindset. How can I provide service to you? Relationship building, being able to listen and not just coming in and assuming I have the answers and telling someone this is what you need to do, but instead asking questions, engaging in listening, active listening skills, but really having that service mentality. I'm here to serve you. I'm here to support you. How can we collaborate together? The unfortunate part is, in my experience, there have been times when those folks come in and say, this is what you will do, and this is how it will happen, which is somewhat of a turnoff because they have an area of expertise and someone in a classroom has 25 kids potentially with all kinds of potential disabilities or challenges or learning styles and trying to adapt their teaching to that. But being able to come alongside someone and being able to have a collaborative relationship with those educators is crucial, and really taking that opportunity to just stop and listen and ask questions.
Yeah, and I would add, it goes back to the idea of one person can't know it all and doesn't need to know it all. And when you've got a team of experts in a space, or if you don't, reach out to other experts to add them to the conversation, because not only does it help you as an educator, figure out things in a more complex way, it changes the experience for the child. And that is ultimately the most important thing that we do, as educators.
And Cynthia, I love that. My mind was going to the same place of like when we center the student as our purpose, it doesn't matter who's right or wrong or whose idea is better. The true collaboration to help the student be successful is victory for everyone, right? And I think, especially I found when I was a new OT or, as a new anything, you're trying so hard to demonstrate your worth. You're trying so hard to be good at what you do and succeed at what you do that sometimes it feels like you're not succeeding if you are, handing over some of that to someone else. And I think that collaboration, though, makes us all better. And at the end of the day, it's for our students. And so, yeah. I see Rick Schneider has returned to us, which means that we are done talking. So, Dr. Schneider, take us home.
Excellent. Thank you so much for our outstanding conversation this evening. Again, I want to express our gratitude to Josh Lyons and Cynthia Phillips for joining us as panelists, and for Eliana for her students' perspective. Before we close tonight, I want to remind you that our next Nights to Know program will be Monday, February 9th at 7 p.m. It will feature alumni from our performance sciences programs. And so the three alumni who are scheduled to be with us include Matt Entz, who's the head football coach at Fresno State University, Tiffany Pins, who's the women's soccer coach at Washington Lee University, and our own Chris Winter, who's the head football coach here of our beloved Knights on campus. On behalf of President Ertzman and the Knights to Know Planning Committee, I want to thank you for joining us. Have a warm, safe, and good night.